Welcome everybody again. Thanks for joining another one of our sessions. This is the sixth one, which Rich Neal is going to host for us, and we're very kindly joined by Amy Boulden, which I'm sure most of you know Amy. She's been involved in Wales golf and flying the flag for Wales on various tours over the last number of years. So Rich is going to just go through kind of Amy's journey from where most of you guys are at the moment all the way through to where she is now, which is tour professional, and everything that she's done along the way, and on to getting back into competing. So I'll just give a quick introduction of Amy. Rich has prepared a slide here with just a few of your accomplishments, Amy. So BBC Wales Young Sportswoman, loads of national titles, home international winning teams. I think I played against you in a couple of them.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I think I got a half at one of them from you.
Yeah.
You probably beat me somewhere along the way as well, but I've chosen to block that out. GB&I Astor Trophy Curtis Cup team winner, Junior Solheim Cup, Junior Ryder Cup, and then on to your professional career. Again, loads of standouts there. Rookie of the Year, winner in the Access Tour, 10 top 10 finishes, and I think one of them was at the British Open. Is that correct? Yeah?
Yes, correct.
So yeah, as I said, Amy has a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure there'll be so many tips and insights to take from her. So yeah, I'll hand over to Rich to take it from here.
Awesome, thanks, Jen. Okay, so first off, Amy, thanks again as well for agreeing to chat to us today. I haven't spoken to you already. I know we're going to get a lot of tips for us all about the whole transition experience, and also about what you're doing now, which can translate to what people are doing now. But I think the first lesson for all of us is this principle of paying it forward, and about you coming back here to chat to all the guys, share your experience. It just speaks volumes of you as an individual. So thank you, Amy. Really grateful for
No problem.
What we'll just get straight into it then is about the pre-transition phase. So before you made that leap into pro life, or before you made that choice, quite a deep question, I think, to start with. But why do you think you were ready?
Yeah, I think all throughout my amateur career, I had different goals that I wanted to achieve before I turned pro. So one of them was obviously wanting to represent GB&I and play in the Curtis Cup. And once I did that, and obviously it was nice to be on a winning team, that was definitely when I felt like I was ready. But leading up to that, I'd achieved like winning a number of times. And I think that was definitely really important before turning pro for me, was I needed to experience kind of under pressure, coming from behind down the stretch as well, and then kind of finishing the job off. But after I played that Curtis Cup in 2012, we won it, I think, in the June. And I know a lot of the girls wanted to turn pro straight after it, but I thought, well, I may as well finish the summer out. I really wanted my last event being home internationals representing Wales. And it was just great that we ended up winning that event as well. So that was kind of capping off my amateur career in such a great way.
It's testament to you again that you wanted to see through your amateur careers to see Wales do well. So again, congratulations to you. That's awesome. The one thing picking up on as well, you achieved a lot in your amateur career. In relation to this readiness, then you were successful. But what made you successful? And the key thing I first want to look at is what was your attitude to competition, to practice?
Yeah, like growing up, I think it's something always my dad has said to me, that I've always been very level-headed on the golf course. Never really been like hot-headed. That's just never really been in me on the course. I probably sometimes need to show a little bit more emotion, which I'm actually working on. But I think it's something that I've just always been very level-headed on the course, very placid. So my dad used to say he could never tell whether I was playing good or bad when he used to come and watch me. And I took that, he used to always say that as a compliment to me, that was something that I needed to carry on and keep in my game, especially turning pro, because you're going to get tested a lot of times out on the course, and something that you need to be able to bounce back if the round's kind of not going your way. If you lose your head too early on, you're just not going to get it back. So yeah, that was definitely one of my strengths.
Okay. So what did you do then to keep a level head? What type of strategies did you put in place?
I mean, I didn't really probably practice anything to keep that. I think that was just something that was always in me. Read a lot of books, and obviously people tell you to stay level-headed and things like that, and it's a very hard thing to just one day not be able to do it and then the next day too. So I was probably quite lucky that it was in me from such a young age. But I'd say, like, reading lots of books, I listen to a lot of podcasts, because I don't really like reading that much. I have to like listen to books on audiobooks, if I'm honest. But it's something we'll probably go on to a little bit later. But like things I do the night before my round, that would kind of help me the next day in my tournament, to feel like maybe under a little pressure and just maybe a little bit more prepared. And that's not something necessary that I've done on the golf course. It's more something that you can do the night before.
But while we're on that, expand on that. I think it's a great point to carry on with.
Yeah, I spoke about this with you probably years ago as well. I read it in a book, and I was going to remember the name of the book, but it's Pia Nielsen and Lynn Marriott, Vision 54, and they talk about visualizing the golf course you're going to play the night before you play it. So you, like, just when you're in bed the night before, ready to go to sleep, and I'll just play the first hole in my head, and I'll go on to the second and the third, and it's how I see myself playing the course. And obviously you see yourself hopefully birdieing every hole. So if you see yourself hitting it down the middle on the first, you see yourself hitting a nice shot into the green and holding a good 6-footer, and then you go on to the second, third, and it used to help me sleep so much better the night before a tournament. Because you know what it's like, you can have restless nights thinking about the next day and how you're going to get on and all the pressure that comes with it. And it was a way for me that really calmed me down, settled me. I slept so much better doing it. And it was something that I learned so early on as an amateur that it was probably the one thing that now I take into like pro life, that it's something that's really important to keep doing.
Yeah, like I said yesterday, I remember you telling me, and I've stolen it as well and told others, so thank you for that.
That's okay.
It is a great tip. And we talked as well previously, we talked about things that people could do to sleep, and as you mentioned, that it is something that helped you as well, sort of decompress and get off to sleep. You mentioned as well that it got you up in a good mood. Yeah,
definitely. I think I just felt like I'd played the golf course before. It was a really weird feeling the next morning. Obviously you'd have your practice rounds and you feel prepared that way, but it was a way that I'd mentally played it before actually going out in a tournament. And it's so hard to recreate pressure when you're practicing, but just to have that feeling of like when I was going to sleep at night, feeling the first tee, that I'm going to be a little bit nervous, and try and think of them nerves the night before and kind of relax yourself and hit that first shot down the middle, and you kind of feel like a weight's lifted off your shoulders, and then you just go out and start to play the course. I don't think I've ever played the whole 18 in my head the night before. I probably only get to like the 5th hole before I'm asleep, but it was just something that's always really helped me. And the next morning I feel really mentally prepared for it.
Where do you see yourself in? Do you know when you're visualizing it? Are you from your eyes, from behind?
Yeah, it's me actually playing the shot. So I would see myself not through my eyes, like I'm watching myself play.
Yeah.
And I suppose everyone's different. It's kind of how you visualize it yourself. You might actually see the ball from your eyes and you're looking down at the ball before you're playing it. I see it more as a kind of spectator watching myself. But that's
what's
just
interesting then? Oh, sorry, I was going to say what's interesting then is that you mentioned by doing that, but when you've got to the first tee, it felt like you've already been there?
Yeah, definitely. I think you've got to try and recreate that feeling on the first tee, and it's very hard to do. And yeah, there might be some tee shots where there's a few people watching. Might be a tee shot that you really don't like. And I've done this a number of times when Paul's been out at tournaments with me as well, where before we tee off, we'll play the first few holes, or we'll pick some different holes to play on the practice ground before teeing off. So we'll always play the first hole. And it'll be because doesn't matter what tee shot it is, whether it's driver or 3-wood. It's really important to kind of mentally picture that first hole and get the feeling of what kind of shot you're going to play, and be really prepared.
Got some good ideas, that coach of yours, hasn't he?
It's not bad.
Brilliant. And picking up on these type of things you're talking about, they take a lot of work and discipline to do. And I'm just picking up, you've obviously got a lot of desire and want. So could you just sort of explain that?
Yeah, I think from such a young age, like I started playing when I was 6, and it was probably when I was around 10 that I started taking it a bit more seriously. I started to be a lot more competitive, so wanting to win quite early on. And I think that was probably starting playing tournament young. And it just carried on from that, really. And you never want to lose, do you? It's just everybody wants to win. Everyone wants to kind of take home the trophy. And I had made all my different goals I'd make small goals, I'd make bigger goals for down the line. But for each tournament, obviously you want to win them. So I would make daily goals and goals for the whole year and kind of tick them off of what I had achieved and what I hadn't achieved. And I think that's what sometimes keeps your desire and keeps your focus on kind of winning and where you want to be. Because if you just let the years kind of roll by, and I felt like I probably did that after my first couple of years on tour. I feel like I probably didn't set myself clear enough goals, and you kind of just let the years roll by without really any specific goals that you're trying to achieve. And I think it's just so important to keep that desire and know what your end goal is. It just keeps your eye on the ball a little bit more.
It's great, and it links to what Charlotte, who's one of our psychologists on the team, mentioned to me yesterday about how you track your progress. And it sounds like that goal setting helps you. You mentioned ticking things off, so it helps you see how you're getting better and what you're getting better at, which fuels that desire, I guess, as well.
Yeah, I've realised that, especially like during this whole lockdown period, it's not just even in my golf that I have to do that. I need to do that in like daily routines of, even if it's doing the washing for the day, of like writing that down and being able to tick it off, and it's something I've achieved for the day. Yeah. And that's definitely something that's helped me over the last few months. Just being able to know that you've achieved something, so you can look back at the end of the day and did quite a lot today. It was a successful day. So whether that's like your short-term kind of goals that you do daily, whether it's your monthly goals, or you look back in 5 years time and you look back at what you have achieved, and then daily goals all work towards the end goal of what you want to do with your career and what you want to achieve.
Must make you feel quite good as well, though, ticking these things off daily.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just something from my mind anyway that keeps me busy. It keeps me kind of, if you write down a big goal that you want to achieve, it can seem so far away. So you have to really break it down into like the smallest of things, of like daily things that you can achieve, and it's very realistic. And then when all of them add together in 5 years time, you don't know what it ends up to, and it can hopefully add up to that main goal that you're trying to achieve.
It's awesome. It's awesome. I love the depth and detail in that. With regards to the one to win, we'll come back to this a little bit later, because you mentioned a great point yesterday about your practice now, about learning to score, or reminding yourself how to score. So we'll come back with our links to that one to win phrase. But prior to the transition as well, about when you talked about thinking you're ready, we've gone through a lot about your mindset, about your approach to your competition. But physically then, with regards to fitness, mobility, etc., why did you think you were ready at that point?
Yeah, I think I'd done all my like fitness training. I think that's obviously where you learn a lot from what you go through being a part of a team with Wales Golf. You realise you have all of these coaches that you have access to, and they kind of give you the tools to know what you need to do. So you have routines with them. You'll all have your fitness routines that you'll do daily. And I had my own fitness coach, and I realised what I'm at home wasn't necessarily what I needed to be doing then when I was away at tournaments. So it's then learning, okay, what works for me when I go away on tour, and what do I need to take with me? What do I need to do daily to keep my body functioning in the right ways? And I would do a lot of like weight kind of stuff back at home, and I had to realize quite quickly that that's not what I need to be doing when I'm out at tournaments. I need to be kind of reserving my strength and doing more mobility stuff that's going to make a difference and help with my golf swing, and just maintenance work really. So just to keep your body moving and making sure it's moving in the right way.
That's great. And with regards to maintenance and the mobility stuff that you've learned now as you've gone through, and you're more an experienced pro, like picking up, and we'll chat a little bit more about that later when we get to that point. But I'm picking up now on what you mentioned about using your resources. So you used you used the support staff, not going to term use, but you allowed them to help you, it sounds like. Yeah,
you just got to get like the information, and they obviously, you get your fitness plan, and everybody's different on what they need to work more on, or what they work on in their plan. But yeah, using that information and making sure that you use it wisely, that you stick to it. It's obviously been made for a reason, and it's what you realize later on when, like, I see the girls on tour. I'm very lucky, I've never suffered with injuries, but I look at some of the girls and they suffer with so many injuries, and I'm in the physio office every day, and I'm quite lucky that with the mobility stuff that I've done over the years, that helps obviously prevent all them injuries. So you might think it's boring, and you might think it's that you don't need to do it because you think, well, I'm flexible and I can do all these different things, but it's definitely things that later down the line, if you want a long lasting career, you really have to kind of get into your routine very early on.
You had good foresight then, because you were aware of investing in yourself for that period of time would have benefits and longer down the line.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you need to, like, I probably should have started it early. I mean, I realize it now. I'm on tour for so many years, that how important that was back then. So I wish I could turn back the clock and probably have that in my routine a bit earlier, but now I know that, well, that's why that was there. It was there for a reason. And sometimes when I see a trainer and they tell me do X, Y, and Z, and I think, oh, well, I got told that 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And I should have probably kept that. So yeah, you don't realize that all of these things are given to you for a reason, and for prevention stuff, to keep your body moving in the right way. And it's definitely things that, yeah, you just need to get into your routine. You'll all have your warm-up routine or your cool-down routines that you need to do every day, and yeah, it's just something that you need to make sure you take 20 minutes out your day and make sure you do.
Yeah, because there are so many benefits then, especially longer down the line as well.
Yeah.
So one of the other questions as well that others have brought in is you were successful at that period on amateur level, but as with all youngsters at that stage, you've got a lot of competing responsibilities, schooling, etc. How did you balance things?
Yeah, I think when I was getting to probably around 16, I was deciding whether I wanted to go to America, if I wanted to leave school and go down that route. So yeah, you have to make some tough decisions quite early on to see what kind of path you want to go down. For me, I didn't want to leave my coach back home. I wanted to stay with my coach in Wales. I was lucky enough to have my sister that worked in a hot country in the Middle East, so I got to spend some winter time out there and practice my golf. So that was the route I went down. I know a lot of girls that have done the American route, and it's worked really well for them. But for me, I wanted to be closer to home, and I think sorry, I've just lost my track. What was the question?
No, it's okay. So we were talking about how you balanced schooling, etc., with your golf and other competing responsibilities, perhaps.
Yeah, so yeah, back to the school. And when I was 16, I made the decision that I wasn't going to carry on and do my A levels. I decided that I was going to do, I think my plan was 2 years full-time golf before turning pro. So I wanted to turn pro around 19. So I finished my schooling at 16, 17 after my GCSEs, and I was lucky enough that my parents supported that. So I was quite lucky that I was able to kind of go into full-time amateur golf with the support of my parents. I felt like I'd done school. I thought about going to America and kind of doing the school in that way, but decided it wasn't for me. But yeah, I know a lot of people want to go to uni, they want to carry on the education side of things. And I think that is great because it's always good to have other options as well. I think it's always good to have kind of the business side of things. But yeah, I was lucky that I kind of took that different way and went into full-time golf, and I just decided to get a part-time job. I worked in waitressing at the golf club. So that was kind of the decision that my dad said was, if you leave school, then you kind of have to earn a little bit of money on the side. And he also made me have a routine. So he would get me out of bed at 6:30 every morning and get to the golf club and play and practice. So I had to still treat it like a job or like I was in school. So I could finish at 3:30, 4 o'clock like your school would, but I had to be at the golf club at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. And that worked for me. I think sometimes the days can pass you by without really doing anything if you don't have a plan. Whereas I was, I probably wasn't best pleased about it at the time when it was in the winter and my dad was getting me up at cold, dark mornings. But I look back at it now and I'm so thankful for him that kind of got me in that routine and I didn't just kind of lie in bed and waste the day. You've really got to get yourself up and into a routine, whether it's in the gym first thing or go and doing a couple of hours practice. But I would always plan my day. So it wasn't that I would be practicing for 8 hours a day, but I would be there. I'd go and play 9 holes in the morning. I'd come in and have a coffee break. I'd then go and think, right, okay, what am I going to work on for the next hour? So it was a planned day, but it was a full day.
Yeah, so I was going to say that to have the 2 years full time, you've definitely taken advantage of it. But it helped then by having that support network to guide you on having a routine and a plan throughout the day, and you mapping that out then.
Yeah, I think because I decided I wanted to leave school after my GCSEs, my parents didn't want me to just waste my days, and it's so easy to kind of get into a bad routine. They just said you either you go to school, you do your practice after it, and on the weekends, or we let you kind of do the full-time golf, but you have to treat it like a full-time job or as if you are in school, so you work them hours.
That's a good tip as well, the amateur stage, about treating it like a job.
Yeah.
That sort of analogy, if you like. So let's make the transition now then. And you've emphasised a lot of what you've done, which is exemplary about how you've conducted yourself at the amateur stage, and to get yourself ready, and then most importantly, to feel ready to attack that transition and be successful to get on the professional circuit. So, why do you think your first year then was so successful?
I think when I turned pro, I went to Q school. I turned pro, I went to Q school, and I ended up finishing 32nd at tour school, and top 30 get their full card. So I was really disappointed. I thought, not really going to get into many tour events, but it's not the end of the world. I can go on the Access. They've got a lot of events, and it'll be good for my game to see how they test up against pros. So I played in my first event and ended up winning it. And then the following year, so that was in like the December after Q school, my first event, I actually end up getting into, or I get an invite into the first event of the year, which was in Morocco. And it had been a long off season. It wasn't until, I think, end of March. So I'd had January, February without any tournament golf. And I turn up and I was just so nervous. I remember seeing the likes of like Laura Davis in the field, Mel Reid, and I was just a little bit it wasn't starstruck, but it was more just felt like out of my depth. I just expected everyone to be really, really good. I mean, they are, but I expected them to be so much better than I was. And it just lost all my confidence going into that week and played terribly. I came back from that, worked a lot on my game, knowing that I was going to feel like a lot more pressure. I don't know why, just because it's called a professional event rather than an amateur event. And I think US Open was one of the next events, and it was US Open qualifying, sorry. And it was 36 holes, and I turned up, I think I just had my dad on the bag. And for some reason, it just felt more like an amateur event. I felt like it was 36 holes in a day. I could just go out there and kind of play golf, and ended up winning that in qualifying for the US Open. And from that, I then ended up just going on a roll. And it was just that my confidence was on such a high that I'd beaten some really good players in that US Open qualifying. And I thought, well, I can compete against them. And I know that my good golf is as good as their good golf. So I think when you turn amateur to professional, you think that it's just a massive jump, which it is. But if you're on the top of your game, whether you're called an amateur or professional, you are good enough to play with the pros if you've got, your full status. And I then went into the next few events, just full on confidence, went about my business by doing everything I was doing as an amateur, like the way I practiced, and kind of just got on a roll with things. I remember I had like 3 top 10s in a row. And because I didn't have my full card, I would have an invite to an event, finish top 10, and it would automatically get me into the following tournament. So I was just on a roll of playing good golf, thinking, well, my goal each week was to get into the next tournament because I didn't have my full status. And it quickly became that I was getting into every event. And by this point, they'd had a re-rank in the system where I then had earned enough money at the start of the year to kind of keep my status and get on the tour full time. So I think by September, I'd had so many good finishes that I was then being interviewed and asked about Rookie of the Year. And at the start of the year, it was never even in my head because I didn't have my full card. So it was never even an option for me to win it. So when September came around, I just remember kept getting interviewed and asking, oh, so you're very close to the top on the Rookie of the Year listings. How are you feeling about it? And you'd get asked after every single round. And I remember thinking, I just want people to stop talking about it, because it was like, just felt like a big deal. It felt like a lot more pressure going into events. And I just had to keep kind of going back to why was I playing well earlier that year? It was because I was setting myself these mini goals of finishing top 10. I was always looking at the top of the leaderboard rather than the cut. I was never thinking, oh, level par's making the cut this week. It was always like, right, someone's shot 6 under first round. Like I was always thinking so many under par each event I played. So I was kind of gravitating towards kind of the top of the end of the leaderboard because I felt my game was in good shape. I was high on confidence. So it was kind of all rolling on from there. And I remember going into the last event, it's in Dubai, and it was just between me and this other girl for Rookie of the Year. And I had my whole family out watching. I got drawn with the girl that was the only person that could beat me, which obviously was typical. They were going to put us together in the first 2 rounds of the tournament. And I just felt it was just so much pressure that I didn't probably feel over the last kind of few months, because I was trying to block it out and I had to really kind of zone into what I needed to do that week and kind of forget about the Rookie of the Year. I thought, if I do X, Y, and Z of what I want to achieve out the first 2 rounds, the Rookie of the Year will come with it if I play the golf I know I can. So I had to really kind of stop thinking about that end goal of trying to win that award and really go break everything down, like I said earlier, and what I wanted to achieve on the golf course. So things that I've done with Paul over the last couple of years would be writing down just a couple of things that I'm thinking about on the golf course that day, like mini goals of what I want to achieve that are doable, things that how I want my mindset to be. And yeah, that was probably how I got through them first 2 rounds just.
I like how you've brought everything back internally, though, focused on yourself to deal with that pressure.
Yeah, I think It was strange as well, because it was probably something that I took out of everything I'd learned being around coaches with the Welsh squad, everything that they kind of teach you when you're away at tournaments and how to do that. And what we're going to go into is like my following years on tour, which then weren't as successful and really struggled, was I probably just went away from that and kind of got a bit lost and didn't know how to get back to it. And it's probably now only that over the last year that I've kind of remembered and like had to read a lot of books, and you read these books and you think, oh yeah, I remember that was what I needed to do, or I remember that was how I should have prepared, all these different things. But it's something that you kind of get a little bit lost if you don't have them people around you kind of reminding you what to do, and you probably take that for granted a little bit when you're an amateur, because you're obviously given it being in the squad and in the system, whereas when you then turn pro and it's kind of like you're on your own on tour and you're out there and you don't have obviously coaches traveling with you every week, you can get a little bit lost with it all.
Yeah, because I remember you saying yesterday as well, and about the importance of keeping things the same and making sure you've got that network around you of people you trust.
Yeah, definitely. You've got to have a really good team around you. You've got to have people that you have a lot of trust in, the people that have a lot of belief in you. So that was like, I needed to get kind of my team together, and you've got to be happy as well when you're away. You can't have like your mind in a different place when you're on the golf course. You've got to be happy being away. You've got to enjoy being out on tour, because it's a very different life. But as everyone, because you're all playing a lot of amateur golf and away traveling anyway, you obviously all love the game, and you will love it out on tour. Like, it is the best feeling playing professional golf. But you've got to be okay with your own company, because you're away a lot on your own. You're away a lot with your own kind of thoughts. And I think something that I've really learned is you've got to understand your golf game and like your tendencies. And something that me and Paul have spoken a lot about in the past would be what my golf swing kind of does under pressure, and or the things that happen in my short game and all sorts of things like that, that what are my faults in my game, and kind of learning about them and knowing then how to fix them when you're away, because you don't always have your coach at a tournament to kind of fix you after the round. And sometimes you can be away for 3 or 4 weeks at a time, and you've got to realize how to manage your game. Sometimes you're not always going to be swinging it perfectly. You've got to realize how to get around the golf course with your B game and still compete. And most weeks you're not going to have it your A game. You're definitely not going to be swinging it your best every week. And that's something that I've really had to learn over the last year, is I'm not going to swing it perfect every tournament. I've got to make sure that other parts of my game are tied. You've got to always have a sharp short game, keep on top of things. And a lot of it is just maintenance work. So I've now broke down my practice sessions when I'm at home and when I'm away, of like, if I go to the driving range, I would usually just like hit balls, a lot of like just like full shots, just practicing like where the ball's going. Whereas now when I go to a driving range, it's a lot of drills. If I'm working on technique, I don't really hit many normal swings. I'm just hitting a lot of drills and getting what I'm working on ingrained. And then I'll then go and do a performance test where I can go and test what I've learned and see, does that stand up under pressure, and am I comfortable with the movements yet? So it's really important to kind of break down your practice and know what you're wanting to achieve. So if I'm doing technical work, it's a lot of block practice of drills and things like that. And then if I'm wanting to then go and test them skills, I've got to then go and do some performance games and see if they work. And I think when I was probably the first few years on tour, I didn't really like have that routine of how to practice. I don't think I really knew how to practice, if I'm honest. I think I just would go to the chipping green and chip a few balls. Whereas when you're traveling with a team and you go to things like the home internationals, or you go and you have the coaches traveling with you, they guide you on how to do that. They say, well, we're going to play a performance test now, and we're going to do a putting test, and you all do that together. Whereas then when you're on tour, you don't have that guidance of this is what you need to do. So I think it's really important to remember them games that you have now, and to write them down and make sure you ingrain them into your routines and into your practice sessions because they're going to come in handy and you're really going to need them.
So there's a couple of things there that I pick up on. One is the importance of testing yourself in your practice, just to gauge where you are and how you're improving, and also to put what you've ingrained under pressure. But one of the things that I also like in what you mentioned is having your B game. And we know in golf that a high percentage of the time people don't have their A game. So what do you do then to accept what you've got on that day so that you can go out and perform effectively?
Yeah, when you're like, I always can tell when I'm warming up for a round, I can always tell like how you're hitting it. I can see that, oh, today feels really good. And usually it'll be a really good ball striking day. If I'm hitting it well on the range, I'll usually hit it well on the course that day. But sometimes you just wake up and you don't feel comfortable, whether it's a little bit of nerves. Most of the times it probably is, and you're probably getting a little bit too quick, or the tempo is just slightly out. And like I played last week at the Buckinghamshire, and I had a terrible warm-up. I didn't feel like I was hitting it good on the range at all, whereas the week before I felt like I was hitting it probably the best I've hit it in a really long time. And I just didn't feel comfortable on the range, but I had a really good session on the putting green, really good session on the chipping green before I went out. And I could just see like my first drive down the first was not very good at all. And I could just feel the first few holes, I just didn't feel comfortable with my striking of the ball, or I knew I didn't have a destructive shot, but it just wasn't quite right. And I knew it was going to be a day where I really needed to probably like grind it out. The weather wasn't the best, so I thought to myself, the scoring's not going to be really low around here today. If I can get it round in under par, it's probably going to be a decent score. And that was all I was thinking that day was, I'm going to have to kind of wedge it really well. I'm going to have to take advantage of the par fives because I could get up on most of them. So as long as my short game was quite decent around the greens, I'm going to give myself chances on them holes. And then on the others, just kind of grind it out and just be patient for chances. So that was a like typical example of feeling not great. I had my best finish out of the 3 tournaments I've played over the last 3 weeks, and it was the worst I've hit it. And it's like, golf is so frustrating because the first, especially the second week, I felt like it was probably the best I've hit it for a really long time, and yet was over par. Really struggled kind of in and around the greens, but best ball striking probably I've had in a really long time. So it's not necessarily always how you're striking the ball, how you're hitting it. I mean, you obviously need to be striking it well and to give yourself them chances, but if you can realize how to get around the golf course with your B game, it's really important. And that's what's gonna like mentally like really help you, because if you can shoot under par with your B game, I mean, that's just going to give you so much confidence, and think when you are hitting it really well and you're going to give yourself way more chances, if you then take advantage of them, that's when like a mid-60s kind of score comes.
What I love with that is it emphasizes that when your game's not there, instead of trying to go back on the range and force your game to come, you've literally gone, right, okay, what's my B game and how am I going to get myself around with the B game to make me successful? So it's a lot more proactive and positive. So I commend you. That's an excellent approach, and it's a great tip for the guys then as well. One thing you mentioned as well yesterday is about the importance of keeping things the same and not getting your head turned, especially in that first couple of years.
Yeah, I think, like I said, when you first turn pro and you go to some of these tournaments and you see some of the girls there that you've watched on TV growing up, and you tend to kind of watch what they're doing, what are they doing differently to me. And I think it can be a good thing. You can learn a lot. You can see maybe if they're practicing in a different way and you think that what they're doing could help benefit you, and you could I mean, take some really good things away from that. But I think sometimes you can look a bit too much into it and think you're doing a lot of things wrong, and they're doing things like because of who they are or what they've done. You watch what they do and kind of think, oh, well, I need to be doing what they're doing. And I remember my first few years on tour, I'd watch certain players that I thought, well, that I looked up to. And I actually didn't feel like they worked particularly hard. I didn't really feel like they were on the range that much, or on the chipping green or the putting green. And I think probably after my first year on tour, I got a bit like complacent. I felt I'd had that really good first year on tour, and I probably took a back seat a little bit and kind of relaxed my practice, especially when I was at tournaments. I would maybe not do as much work as I normally would. I'd think, well, I mean, the top players aren't really doing that, so I've had a good year, maybe I don't need to do that. And definitely not the case for me. I'm definitely someone that needs to work hard at my game to kind of keep it at a good level. I'm not someone that can just turn up on the day and play well. I need to put a lot of work in behind the scenes. Some people are really naturally talented where they can pitch up and shoot under par every time without really kind of doing much work at the event. I'm a person that needs to kind of make sure I'm really prepared to feel good on the golf course. So I think that was definitely something that I was watching what other people were doing, especially with caddies. I could see a lot of girls had professional caddies on the bag. And the first year I was mostly doing it myself. I had my dad a few times. But when I started doing well, I was then like, oh, well, I need to have a professional caddy like all the other girls do. So I was then searching for a professional caddy. And you soon realize that you're paying them a lot of money every week. And then that's an added kind of pressure. Sometimes, or they can be really worth it if they can save you a couple of shots on your round. But I think overall, you've got to have someone that you really trust with you. So finding a good caddy is really important, but at the end of the day, it's got to be a really good caddy for you, someone that you have complete trust in. There's probably only 2 or 3 people that I really trust and really enjoy having on the bag, one of them being Paul. But you've got to really trust that person, and they've got to believe in you, and you've got to have that good partnership on the golf course, not necessarily just going to the event and being like, well, I need to have a professional caddy this week, because I mean, what is a professional caddy? It's just someone that gets paid for their job, whereas you could pay your best friend to come out with you, and technically that then makes them a professional caddy. So it's got to be someone that you really enjoy having next to you, and someone that you trust, and that's going to get the best out of you.
It's a great point there about ensuring you've got a personality that you can gel with. And then if I just track back a bit, just to say, you know, thank you for sharing your experience in the second or so years. Very honest of you, and that second season syndrome is very, you know, common across all athletes. And thank you for sharing, being honest and emphasising the that experience, but also the learning. It's a great tip for the guys to ensure that they keep on point. And alongside that, and as well, with regards to the personalities that gel, Kath O'Connor's asked a question about, you know, how do you select these people that you gel with? You know, how do you get the right people around you?
I think a lot of it, like with the caddy situation, I think it's trial and error. I think you've got to trial people out, because you don't really realise until you have someone on the bag that annoys you, that they're not then the right person. You've got to, and that's what I did. I remember I went through so many caddies in one year. I was trying to find the right person that fitted kind of my personality, someone that wasn't going to take too much control, because a lot of them were taking, I mean, I felt like they wanted to hit the shot for me. They were telling me so much information, and I felt like, yeah, they wanted to hit the shot. And I felt like, because I'm, I mean, a little bit of a pushover in a way, that I would always listen to them. And if they told me it was a 7 and 9, in the back of my head, I thought I can get there with 8. But because they've said 7, I was like, okay, I'll just hit a 7, because I don't want it to, like, I think, well, if I'm wrong and they're right, I don't want anyone to go, oh, well, I told you so. Whereas really, you know your own game. And unless you have someone on the bag that knows your game pretty much more than you and knows your tendencies. And that was one of the reasons why it was so good when Paul came out and caddied for me, because he knew my good and bad shots. He knew that maybe my bad shot was a bit of an overdraw where I'm probably going to get a little bit more out of it. We could then make club decisions based on that day of how I was hitting it and the places to miss and all this different kind of information. So yeah, I'd say overall it's probably a little bit of trial and error of kind of realizing personality wise as well of who you get on with.
It's a great tip, though, isn't it, about having someone who understands your game, and also it sounds like having someone who can discuss the options with you when you're on the course, instead of someone who's quite dictatorial and telling you what to do.
Yeah, I mean, some people might kind of like that assertive, this is definitely the club. But if I like to have maybe a little bit more control, I always like to have the course planner. So if they want a course planner, then I'll buy them one. They can have one as well, but they're not having mine. I need to kind of keep going through my routine of always writing down the yardage, where the wind is. And I mean, it's something that's been in my routine for so many years that if I then just take that away, it kind of messes everything up. And I think I remember British Open one year, I gave full control to my caddy. I didn't even have a yardage book in my hand, and I just gave it to him. And I thought, right, this is how we're going to do it this week. And just terrible decision. That isn't the way I would normally do it at a tournament. But I felt it was a major, and that was I don't know why, but I felt like that was a good decision for him to kind of have control, me to have less information and see how that worked. But you soon realise that what works for you and what doesn't.
Yeah, and I know each person's their own, but for a lot of individuals, and including yourself, you're the one hitting the shot. So consequently, you want to feel that you're confident based on all the information you can give, and that you are hitting the right shot, which is completely understandable. But as you're right, each to their own, I suppose, in that sense. When you made the transition into the pro game, was there anything you weren't prepared for? So anything that cropped up, but
I think probably like the pressure from, I'm going to say home, but not family. I mean, my home golf club was one thing that I felt. I remember, I never felt it as an amateur, but I remember coming back to the golf club, and I've grown up there. I've been there since I was 6 years old, and I would go in the clubhouse like I would go in for a chat with the bar staff every time I'd be back. And a few members would come up and they'd be like, oh, you've not had a very good week this week. And usually probably would never normally get to me, but as a pro, because it probably means a little bit more, and I'd get comments, and they probably didn't mean any harm by it, but it was little comments like, oh, you've not earned any money in a couple of weeks, and just little comments like that I would then, when my dad was the pro at that club, I'd go in the shop and have a moan to my dad and be like, I can't believe the members are saying that. Like, I would never say that about their job. I could never go, oh, you've not had a very good week in work this week. Like, it wouldn't be something that would get said. Yeah. Whereas in golf, you just feel maybe the spotlight's on you a little bit more. And people feel that they can say them things. Like, I felt like that from my home club, but I know that people get it on social media. If, like, I had a really good year that first year, so you're kind of in the spotlight a bit more. And then if you then don't do so well over the next year, people then start asking questions. They kind of question what you're doing. And that was very much me. I questioned what I did over them few years, and it then has taken me over the last couple of years to kind of get back on track, realize what I was doing right, what maybe I was doing wrong. And I spoke to you yesterday, Rich, about someone like Bryson DeChambeau, who has obviously decided that what's best for him and what he believes at the moment is hitting it absolutely miles. And he's obviously put in a lot of work to kind of doing that. But my point is that he has got so much belief in that theory.
Yeah.
And he believes that by hitting it so far that he can win golf tournaments that way. And it's so impressive that, I mean, people probably have their own theories and they think, well, that's not gonna, I mean, if he's hitting it however far and hitting it in the rough or in the trees, it's not gonna make a difference. Surely he's not gonna win golf tournaments, but he has so much belief in what he's doing. And that's really important for everybody, is to have a lot of belief in their own game. And what they're doing, what they're practicing, who they're working with. You've just got to have a lot of belief in kind of your team and what you're working on, because that's where your confidence is going to come from. Whereas if you have all these outsiders giving their input and telling you what you should and shouldn't be doing, it does definitely get in your head and kind of make you question things.
So you've got to get the right people around you, challenge you in the right way for your development, and support you positively with that. Aligned to what you mentioned about the that belief you've got, you mentioned about that, wavering belief. There's a question that's come in which is sort of related, which is from Toby Bishop, which says, if you could have one part of your game to be the best on tour, which do you feel is the most important that separates potentially the great from the good?
For me, it'd be putting. I feel like if I could putt a little bit better, then scoring wise would just be a massive difference for me. I noticed that a lot last year, playing over in America. I felt that I always kind of got it round with my long game. I've been working a lot on kind of striking the ball better, but I've always been a pretty straight hitter of the golf ball. But if I could hole, more of them kind of 10-foot putts, which I just feel like I don't hole enough of, that would be something that I think would definitely improve my scoring.
Right. And I'm going to pick up on scoring as well, because you made a great point yesterday about your approach to practice, but also then your approach to competition, about what you focus on in relation to the scoreboard. So if you could elaborate to the guys on that, I think is a really good point.
As in scoreboard watching, is that?
Yeah, so where you set your goal, and then where you gravitate to as a result then.
Yeah, so I felt something that I always was taught growing up was you shouldn't think about a score. You shouldn't think that you want to shoot level par today, or you shouldn't think that you're going to shoot 1 under today. I was always told never to be like score orientated, but I think the first time I did it was at LPGA Q School with Paul on the bag, and we'd wrote this plan together for the week of what we were going to do practice wise. We were there a few days leading up to the tournament, how we were going to prepare. We'd been out it was over 2 golf courses. We'd been out over both golf courses, and Paul had asked me, what do you think the winning score is going to be? Or what was the winning score last year? I think we looked at. And I think the winning score was maybe 12 under, was it? Or 11 under? So we thought, can I get to 12 under with the way I'm hitting it? And we thought, well, yeah, that's doable. That's 3 under a round. That is definitely doable. I'm playing well enough to do that. And then we'd break it down again of, okay, how can I shoot 3 under around each golf course? Where are my chances? And you've got to give a little bit of respect to the golf course. You can't be like, I'm going to go out and birdie every hole when that's a little bit unrealistic. You've got to look at the holes which are playing tough, which holes are ones that you need to be taking advantage of. And we just broke down every little department of how I was then going to play the golf course and how I was going to practice and what I was going to work on in my practice to kind of get that score. So for that week, there was a different kind of rough over there in Florida, and it was a kind of a rough that you needed to get used to. It was what I wasn't used to playing back in North Wales. It was really tough. I had to play them differently, and I had to learn new skills that week to kind of get up and down from when I was missing the green, of how I was going to get up and down out that rough. There was all different lies. Sometimes it would sit up, sometimes it would sit down. So we did a lot of work in and around the greens. We did a lot of holding out stuff, a lot of pace drills. And so we broke that score down into how I was going to practice. And I always had in my head, well, 12 under was the score I was going to get to, and that would win the tournament. And having that mindset and having that all broken down, not once did I think the cut's going to be this, or what's going to make top 25. Okay, it's going to, because top 25 would get through to final stage. Top 25 would be, let's say, 4 over. Never was I thinking, well, if I'm 4 over or better, I'm going to get through. And I think that's sometimes what you can think of, especially if you go to something like Q School. You can be like, well, last year the top 25 was a couple over par, so that's what I need to get to. And I remember I used to do it as probably in my first couple of years where I was looking at when I was trying to turn pro and I went to Q school for LET. That probably was what I looked at, was what got your card. So what was the worst score that got your card? Whereas what was that week I was thinking, what was the winning score? And ever since that week, it's now been something that I've thought about of what's going to be the winning score this week. And it was, again, something I did at LETQ school that I had to go back to at the start of this year was, okay, I've told many people this, but I felt a little bit embarrassed to go back to Q school this year. And I mean, I just made the decision to play in America last year, and I decided to go and play some Metro Tour and kind of give that a go. And it was a great decision. I felt like I learned a lot about my golf. It was great to play against different players overseas, but ultimately I really missed playing in Europe. Felt that I probably needed to get my game a little bit better in Europe before kind of making the jump over again. So had to go back to Q school, which, I mean, because I've been on tour for probably, I think, 6 years already, it was a weird feeling having to go back to Q school. And I was going back and obviously playing against girls that have been amateurs and they've just turned pro and they've gone to Q school. So like fresh players, fresh people that have got a lot of drive and very competitive because they're so excited to turn pro. So it was, whereas I was feeling a little bit anxious about having to go back to Q school. So that week I really had to concentrate on what worked well for me when I won LPGA Q school, and what I did that week I needed to do at LET Q school. And that was again what I did. I broke it all down. I just went there with my dad, so I had him on the bag, so I didn't really have any distractions. I didn't spend any time with kind of any of my friends that were there. I just decided to take that week of really working on what I was going to do to get to the score I needed to. And sometimes you can, especially when you go to tournaments, you can get into a little bit of like socializing with your friends a little bit too much. And that week I just really needed to have like full concentration on what I needed to do and kind of get the job done. So yeah, that's definitely something that I'm going to carry on now for the whole of this year and probably the rest of my career, is breaking that down of what the winning score is going to be and how I'm going to get to it.
Yeah, it, I dare say, it helps motivate you as well, and it's to really go out there and want to rip it up against the rest of the field. And it links to another question that's come from the guys, Connor Owen, is how do you stay motivated to play continuously?
Like I said earlier, just setting goals, mini goals. I remember last year I played, I think 8 or 9 weeks in a row in America. I mean, it was just brutal. And you realise soon enough that you can't play that many weeks in a row. For me, what works well is probably 3 maximum. And I think that's something that you've got to work out for yourself, is how many weeks until you want to come home. Because at some point, if you're playing 4 or 5 weeks in a row and 1 week you turn up and you're like, I just want to go home, there's probably not really much point you playing if your head's not in it. You may as well work out, well, I play really well for 3 weeks and then I'm ready for a 2-week break and then I'm going to go back out. So you've got to work out what works for you that way. But yeah, like I said, just setting mini goals of what you want to achieve each week, especially if maybe you're not playing your best golf 1 week, like mini personal goals that you could be on the second round and maybe you're missing the cut, and you've got 6 holes to play and there's no way you're going to make it, but set yourself a target for them last 6 holes just to kind of keep your mind in it, and to kind of get some confidence for the following week, because the last thing you want to do is kind of give up and waste them last 6 holes, because you never know what can happen either. If you can set yourself that mini goal of the last 6 holes and playing it 3 under par, just trying to get something out of it.
So there's a couple of questions left that I'll go to the floor with again. Interesting one from Archie Davis about tips on what audiobooks to listen to, what podcasts to read.
Okay, podcasts. Oh, I've got so many. trying to think of the names. And I listen to ones with Cameron McCormack. He's an American coach. I enjoy listening to their podcasts. There is, I usually type in names. So if I was to type in like David Ledbetter, and there's going to be a podcast that comes up with him speaking on it. There is one that is such a good podcast. I'm going to have to remember it before the end of this. It'll come to me, but podcast where you just type in different people's names is what I tend to do, rather than just listen to kind of the same people or the same podcast. I would type in, like if you would type in Rory McIlroy, that would be a podcast that would come on that he's featured on. But yeah, there's so many good ones out there. You just, and they don't even necessarily need to be golf. Sports ones, like any sports. If you just think of like top athletes in their sports and kind of research them and then listen to kind of their thoughts. There's obviously the Netflix documentary, The Last Dance. That was a great documentary to watch, something that's kind of like motivating. And that book I said about at the start of this was the Pia Nielsen and Lynn Marriott book. It's about Vision 54, but that is definitely one that I would recommend, especially for the girls, because I think they talk a lot about like Annika Sorenstam. So maybe can relate a little bit more than when you read about books with Rory and Tiger. It was one that I related to more than anything.
Yeah, I've listened to them when I was out in the States. It's been really impressive, and loads of good tips for all aspects of your game with them. Someone called Paul Williams, not sure who he is, said, can you share with the players the value of the course planner and why do you keep them year on year?
Yeah, so I know that like the tournaments that we've been playing over the last few weeks, we're now allowed to use Bushnells, and I hate it because I feel like it just takes away like my thought process before playing the shot. So I get to the ball and I laser the pin, and I don't even look at like how far the pin is. I don't look at, I mean, is it tucked behind a bunker? And you just get out of that. Whereas like I'm in such a routine now, whereas I hate using my Bushnell. I'll only use it in practice rounds to double check, usually like if there's any slope. That's really the only reason why I get it out. Even in practice rounds, I like to work out my yardage, write out the pin, write out what it's playing with the wind and if it's a little bit cold or whatever, or the slope. And I just like to have all the information down, because if I look through a Bushnell and I write down that it's 145, I don't know like what the situation was. Whereas if it's all written down in my course planner from the day before, I look back to it and I can be like, okay, this is what happened the day before. Even especially at the end of the week, you can look at what happened. So you can look at if there was a certain wind that you didn't like or that you didn't play well in. So you can see if there was a pattern of the wind was always off the right when I hit this pull. So you can see, well, okay, maybe it's the situation rather than your technique. So I think it's really good to kind of look back at the end of the week as well to see what kind of happened. And I write all my stats in my yardage book as well. So I like to do it on the way round because I've got a terrible memory to remember after it. So I like to kind of just got in a habit of doing it on the way round and writing it after every shot.
You dissect things to the nth degree, and it emphasizes well that you really like to be informed.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I probably don't really know, like I wouldn't notice maybe what's going on the golf course or after that round, but especially like at the end of the week when you're looking back and you maybe say to your coach, oh, I really struggled with my iron play this week. And that it's then like gives them an opportunity to break it down and say, well, what was the situation? Maybe it was that there was out of bounds down the left and wind off the right. So you might see a pattern of maybe it wasn't your technique that was wrong. Maybe it was the situation that you were in, the pressure that you didn't like a certain kind of look of a hole. So I think it's definitely worth writing down all the information. For me, I've always liked having the yardage book. I always enjoyed kind of making them as an amateur and making them my own. And then you've got a lot of trust in it as well. I know so many times where people bushnell the back of a green. I mean, it's just the worst mistake in the world, isn't it, to fly over the back of the green because you've not worked out the yardage correctly. So, I mean, it's something that definitely is worth taking the time to do before an event.
It's great as well, because you mentioned things like temperature, etc., will have an effect on the ball, and what have you. So you're getting so fully informed prior to it, but also then by reviewing after it accurately, or more accurately, you're then working on the things that you should be working on instead of something that possibly didn't need attention, which is really smart again. So well done, Amy. I've got a couple of questions left then from the group. One from Athergate about, during your amateur career, how did you react when you didn't achieve one of your goals? Even now? I
think I would probably break down my goals into, like my winning kind of goals. So like, let's say as an amateur, I wanted to win certain events. And if that didn't happen, as long as I'd completed kind of like the mini goals that I'd set. So it's not necessarily then the outcome goals, it would be more what my daily goals were. So whether it was, like I said with my to-do list, whether it was like half an hour every day working on my drills, half an hour every day working on a certain performance game that I needed to complete. And as long as I'd completed kind of all of them things in my daily routines that I'd wrote down for that day, then that's all you can do really. You can't control other people, how they're playing, and whether they're going to win the tournament. I mean, everyone's probably got their own goals and what they want to achieve, and sometimes it's, if they play better, then you've just got to take your hat off to them. But as long as you know that you've done everything you can to achieve what you want to achieve, then I mean, you can't really have any regrets. You can't really dwell on not winning or not achieving that goal. But it'll definitely get you closer to it, and it'll definitely help you in the future, and will definitely help you become a better player if you take off all of them kind of to-do lists and mini goals that you set yourself every day.
Yeah. So you know that you've done everything you can, instead of, you know, you haven't achieved your goal, but the reason you haven't achieved it because you didn't do everything in preparation, etc. So you don't have that feeling. You put everything into it. So emphasizing the importance of living your life with no regrets and working as hard as you can. Finally, you mentioned yesterday, and it links into a question that Jordan will have in relation to competition, but you talked about your practice where you just wanted to get back on and learn, or not learn, so remind yourself how to score. If you elaborate a little bit on that, and I'll go straight into Jordan's question as the final one.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? My earphones just ran out of battery.
You talked about, I'll go straight into Jordan's question anyway. So your first week back before competing, what did it look like and how did you split it up?
The week of the tournament,
yeah.
Do you mean? So Monday would be the day where I'm doing a little bit of technique work, just tidying up on a few things of making sure everything kind of feels right, drills, just making sure everything's kind of like ready for the week technique wise. And then obviously playing the golf course and planning it. So Monday afternoon I'd go out and probably play 9 or 18 holes and see the golf course, plan it, make sure I know exactly, like I've got a clear guide of where I want to hit it all the way around the golf course. So I've got a clear picture of how I'm going to play it. And then Tuesday would be more performance stuff. So there's a putting drill that I would do every week before a tournament now, and make sure I do that every week and kind of can see what my percentage is on that kind of putting game. And that puts me under a little bit of pressure because I know what the tour standard would be. So I can see if I get to that or if I don't. And if I don't get to it, then I can think, right, okay, I need to do a little bit more work on my putting. So I would then do a lot of start line stuff. A lot of, like with the gate drill, that would be what I do with my start line with putting. I'd go on my mat and make sure everything looks and feels right on there. And I now like to warm up with that as well, because I realised for me, putting wise, I putt my best when I take a little bit longer in my warm up doing my putting drills. And that's something that I've realised over probably the last 6 months or so of playing. When I do work on the mat and when I do work on my gate and start line, I putt so much better out on the golf course. And whether that's a mental thing of me knowing that I've done that work before I went out on the round, especially in the morning as well, because sometimes I can feel like I putted really well the day before and the next day I just don't feel like it starts online. So it's something that's really important for me before I go out playing.
The last thing in line to what you've done now in these current competitive matches or competitions you're in, sorry, you talked about how you wanted to get back to reminding yourself how to score to get ready for these competitions in your practice.
So writing out a score, did you say?
No, about when you went on the course to practice, that you practiced to remind yourself how to score.
Okay. Yeah, I think, I mean, I realised it coming out of lockdown. I went out and all I've done over the lockdown period was hit balls in a net in my garden and a little bit of putting on the carpet on a mat. So I felt like technique-wise was in a good place, went out on the golf course and just completely forgot how to get around it. I was so into how the strike was, whether it was starting online, if I was playing the shot I wanted to. And I just completely got out. I forgot like to think about where the wind was. I forgot to think like where was the best place on the green to leave it. And I just got so out of playing golf and so into the technique side of things that it soon, I think probably playing these last few tournaments, you soon have to get back into that and realise, well, it doesn't matter if how you hit it really on the golf course. The score's what's kind of goes down and what's wins your golf tournament. So yeah, I soon had to realise that I had to get my chipping and putting back, because that was chipping was the first thing that kind of went away from me. My feel was completely gone in and around the greens. And that's your scoring clubs, isn't it? Your wedge playing, chipping and putting. So I had to quickly learn how to get that scoring element back. And that was just by putting a card in my hand, playing friends for a little bit of money and having that little bit of pressure of, right, okay, you've got to get around the golf course today with whatever swing you've got, and quickly having to realise that. So definitely needing to get back into scoring, playing a lot of scoring games, because like I said, it was just a lot of technique over the last couple of months and you forget how to score.
Some great advice there. Great advice as well, I think, regards to practice, irrespective of where you are. Even if it's after lockdown, just to ensure that you keep that competitive mindset, which is evident, it's innate in you. Thank you so much, Amy. I've written on loads and loads and loads of tips that we'll collate for the guys to feed back to them. To finish, is there anything that you think is one stellar piece of advice? Loaded question, but one stellar piece of advice you can give to the guys?
I'd probably say a couple. I'd say that definitely try the technique of visualizing the golf course the night before a round. I'd say that was something that made a massive difference to me when I first started doing it. That would be something I'd just like tell you to try it, give it a go, practice it, because you never know, it might help you like it did with me. And also just to learn a little bit more about your own game, learn a little bit more about your tendencies, so you don't have to kind of rely on your coach as much when you're away at tournaments, because there's going to come a time where they're not traveling to every event with you, and you soon have to realize that you kind of have to sometimes at a tournament week change, or not change things, but realize what you do under pressure, and how you can fix it for the next day without having kind of a coach there telling you. So understand your golf swing, understand what you do under pressure, and really learn about that. Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Amy. And I know everyone here, a lot of people will be hopefully writing a lot of these tips now as you've gone through. But to everyone, I'll collate everything. I'll send them in a jail to circulate out. But I know Jill will finish off now, but just on behalf of Wales Golf anyway, just thank you so much for your time, for being forward, and for the specific and stellar advice. Thank you, Amy.
No worries. Thank you.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks, Amy. It was fantastic to have you, and for your honesty and all the insights and information that you've given. Hopefully the guys will take some really good pieces out of it that work for them. Thanks to Rich for doing the top job again. And yeah, Amy, we just all would like to wish you well, I suppose, going forward, and even this week down in Kent. You've been great to Wales Golf in the last number of years, and I hope that that continues as well. And if we can help you in any way along the road, that'd be great too. And then just to finish off, next week we are back on Thursday evening, where Zach Gould is going to host, and Reece Enoch will be joining him to talk about physical preparation and traveling on the road and stuff like that. So thanks to everyone for joining, and thanks again, Amy and Rich, and see you next week.